Hello, my name is Kayla Muller, and this is my case study for EDL 851. This is a case study that's about how a teacher has reacted negatively to principal evaluation. To summarize the case and establish the facts, what's going on is that the principal is having trouble with the irritable teacher during evaluation reviews. What has happened, the principal has submitted teacher evaluations because the due date is nearing. There has been several informal evaluations, 2 that we know of, and 1 formal evaluation with an evaluation form. The common practice that has been deficient from this teacher, which is Mrs. Stevens, is classroom management issues. The principal has decided not to renew Mrs. Stevens' contract based off of these evaluations. Mrs. Stevens backlashes the principal and says that she has not had a fair evaluation and the principal's supervision was not adequate for the school. Any legal issues? I did not really see any issues legally as I read the case study, but I feel like if this case went on, there could be some legal issues in the preventative law by the principal for not providing effective supervision and evaluation of the teacher performance. This is because there is no known documentation for any of the walkthroughs that he has done. Just documentation from the formal evaluation document, and that's just one piece of documentation that he has to dismiss this teacher. Some ethical issues, educational malpractice by the principal for lack of skills of performing professional duties, and for Mrs. Stevens, repeating ineffective procedures within the classroom, and possibly the lack of skill in order to maintain an environment of conductive learning, where we did not see this with the evaluations that we have done. So this case, both principal and teacher are not fulfilling their roles of duty to effectively build a culture of student success. That's the main priority here within a school, is to promote and build this culture that provides students to succeed. So what do we know about this study? We know that the principal has visited the room several times and has done his documentation of his evaluation. It is evident that Mrs. Stevens is having classroom management problems, and it's obvious that she's frustrated with the leadership of the principal. Based on the evaluation, she's not getting renewed next year. We know where this stuff is taking place at, Mrs. Stevens' room, and the post-conferences have been done in the principal's office. What is not known is a lot of things. I feel like there's a lot of unknown things with this case study. We do not know how long the principal has been in this position, or how much professional learning he has had training in order to lead a school. Is there any documentation from any of the walkthroughs that he's done? What is the school culture and relationships like right now within the school or with other teachers? And has the principal done any professional learning help for the teachers? Has he guided them to anything in the past? And another thing that came up was Mrs. Stevens was going to be in a tenure year if she was retained. So just making sure the principal does know that tenure doesn't guarantee employment. What it does is guarantee the teacher due process in order to get dismissed as a teacher. Mrs. Stevens, what we don't know, has she reached out for any help? Is she keeping this to herself? Is she relying on other teachers? We don't know. Has she went through a mentor program within the school? What we do know about Mrs. Stevens is that she does have a supervisor that does come in periodically, but she does state that the supervisor has not helped. Is this class an issue across the board? We don't know that. And the program, has the principal done any walkthroughs or evaluations in the past? Is this just a thing that he does when due dates approach, or is he in the classroom quite often? Okay, so let's prioritize this information and what would happen if this were to go on. So what do you think? The school culture I think that what's at most at stake is to damage the school culture and the relationship between the principal and the staff if he lets Mrs. Stevens go without even trying to help, is the main key here. He hasn't tried much to lead her in the right direction. What's the other staff going to think about that if he lets her go without the help that she needs? The stakeholders have not been consulted as the superintendent and board members. Obviously, every dismissal will have to go through the board, and they're probably going to ask for certain things in order to have evidence of why we should dismiss Mrs. Stevens. And he doesn't have much documentation other than the one documentation of the evaluation. So I do not think all stakeholders have been consulted with. I think he probably should have brought the superintendent and just brought knowledge to him about what's been happening. Also, the staff around this teacher could have helped if the principal would have used them to help build up the relationship between them and Mrs. Stevens. And I believe that a decision cannot be made of not renewing Mrs. Stevens' contract because of the deficiency of the building leadership by the principal. So, what can we do? If we do nothing at all, I think that would be the worst case. So this is option one. Why do I think this would be worst case? Because I think it would lead to severe consequences for the principal and expose the lack of leadership within that school. I think the board members would see this, and it would not be beneficial for the principal. It could become lack of trust between the remaining teachers and the principal because of other things stated before. Mrs. Stevens would likely take this to court and create negative attention towards the school. This is one thing that she did say she would do if the dismissal went through. What could I do as a principal in a comprehensive action? This is what I believe that I would do in this situation. I would probably contact the superintendent and share with him what has occurred and admit to them the wrongdoings that I have done and ask for help in the leadership aspect, or possibly some professional development or professional learning. And then I would call in another meeting with Mrs. Stevens and also invite the supervisor that has also been lacking in leadership into this meeting and really get this thing narrowed down and what we need to do. Okay, I would try to, admit the relationship between Mrs. Stevens and I, and provide her of what I have done incorrectly and my downfalls as a leadership, and see how she responds to that. I would also try to set up some support system for her. I would set up monthly evaluations that would have multiple people rotating in and just not myself to prohibit bias in the evaluation. And I would try to do a student survey. I want to try to figure out what is really going on in that class and have the students' input in what they have been learning and the teacher's approach to learning in that classroom. I was also set up weekly walkthroughs that be done and have a weekly visitation conference held. And I would set up a compromise with Mrs. Stevens that if there is improvement in the evaluation process, that she will be retained for the following year. Another thing that I could do with that is tell her about tenure. If she gets through this evaluation, she could have, benefit of tenure. Obviously, she would have due process within that, and that might be a thing to look forward to be more successful within her teaching. I would also, what does the superintendent need to do? Probably both the principal and Mrs. Stevens would attend professional development. So superintendent and the principal should set up professional development along with professional learning to improve the deficient areas that we are showing here. There would be evaluation of the principal done with the superintendent on a yearly basis. with meetings held each month to see the progress of leadership and providing positive culture. I would appoint a teacher mentor to help guide Mrs. Stevens with classroom management. Probably one of my teachers that I see, a good relationship with them, and I could see positive interactions with Mrs. Stevens and her also. Then option 3 is this intermediate approach. So I would say this is the in-house meeting where I would not take this out to the superintendent, which I don't think is the best choice, but I could see keeping this in-house. So I just feel like this is a cop-out for the principal, and I would probably not go through this, but this is what would happen. I would call the meeting with Mrs. Stevens and the supervisor, try to come up with a plan, enhance feedback given and advice, point her in the direction of some leadership, classroom management, professional development, or professional learning, and set up one more evaluation with both the principal and the supervisor evaluates to base the employment of this last evaluation. So giving her one more chance. Okay, so pros and cons of each. I believe the option 2, the comprehensive approach, is probably the best approach. The pros of that is that the principal takes accountability for the actions that he has done in the past, the lack of leadership. There is improvement plans for all parties involved. There is accountability in place. It gives Mrs. Stevens a second chance, and there's no biased evaluation. The cons to this is Mrs. Stevens may get stressed out with all the pressure of the evaluations and talking so much with the principal. So hopefully we can divvy all of that up so Mrs. Stevens has other people to talk to than just besides me. Choosing the best options. I believe that the comprehensive plan is the most effective way to solve this issue with Mrs. Stevens. In this plan, I've set up effective measures for improvement for both the principal and Mrs. Stevens. Mrs. Stevens now has a group of support from a variety of groups within the school, while the principal is taking steps with the superintendent to make sure that he is doing the effective job with his leadership skills and build a culture of success for all. I think that all stakeholders are implemented with this plan from the superintendent to the students for the benefit of all. I think there are some creative options to view the effectiveness of Mrs. Stevens' instruction, such as teacher mentor, and I can report with that mentor as I need, and student surveys to gather knowledge of student learning. So how do I implement this decision? Obviously, I would call a meeting with the superintendent and the supervisor. I would most likely, express to him that I need help with the situation and I'm struggling with building leadership and building a positive learning culture for all students. I would meet again with Mrs. Stevens along with the supervisor to create a team culture and inform her of the system that we have in place to support her. If Mrs. Stevens becomes irritated and confine it, I would warn of what has already been in place and can go forward with not renewing her license. I would also bring up that she has one more year to tenure, so it would be an achievement to work towards. If this plan does not work and Mrs. Stevens shows no improvement, I would say we have done everything possible and it would be time to move on from her. I think this is a better approach than just not do anything at all, because we have tried to implement things for her in order to be successful and provide a positive culture within her classroom. I would feel bad if I didn't try anything and just dismiss her. That would probably diminish the culture of the school and the relationships that I have with the other teachers. This is my reflection of what I learned about this case study. Thank you for listening, and hopefully you learned something from this presentation. Thank you.